All right, so hello everybody. I'm really excited to talk about a project that our team is particularly excited about today, which we call an active transport toolbox for life and materials science. So as a background, membranes are essential in a wide variety of areas, including life. It houses ATP synthase and is of course surrounding a lot of cells, and it also has materials applications that you can see in the world all around you. From our perspective, initially, we're very interested in biological membranes, and of course, life is compartmentalized, and this spatio-temporal compartmentalization allows it to perform a wide variety of tasks, which are extremely important to life. It also has, in terms of compartmentalization and membranes, potential and development of future materials. So in terms of molecular machines, what is the state of the art? So we've already heard over the last few days about a variety of these systems. These all operate in solution. They're chemically fueled up to light operated and autonomous. And they couple a fuel of some description to an amount of local work, but the work isn't actually turned into anything on a macro scale. And autonomously operated machines harness fluctuations of fields and gradients, and that's one of the things we're particularly interested in. So in terms of membrane transport, what is the state of the art? So this is really what we're aiming at now. In terms of a mechanical instop molecule, simply inserting a MIM into a membrane is the state of the art. That's the best we can currently do. In terms of active transport, you can do this with small molecules. But again, this is one of the few examples that there is in the literature. This came out this year. It's truly state-of-the-art work here. And so this retaxane is able to just facilitate passive transport and doesn't do any active transport at all. So fundamentally, active transport is hard, and it requires transport of solutes across gradients and against gradients. And so to achieve that, we have two challenges initially that we need to address. So you have a physical transport of a carrier or movement of a component of some type of molecule having a membrane across that membrane, and then you need to modulate the binding affinity of anything that you're carrying across to allow you to both bind it and then release it on the other side. So our strategy is twofold. So one is using small molecules to produce what we call machine-like behavior. These molecules aren't machines in themselves, but they can have a collective action to give you machine-like and out-of-equilibrium behavior. And so small molecules such as this, which I've worked on in the past, can transport cargoes across membranes passively. This is a chloride nitrate antiporter. Active transport using molecules like this is difficult. As I said, this is the only example. So can we exploit oscillators, perhaps, to fuel this system? So this is a pH oscillator. We have a pH increasing and decreasing. The most important point to take home here is autonomous active transport by a small molecule has not been done. And that is one of the things that we seek to achieve here. We can do this using a variety of literature and well-reported bulk oscillating systems, and pH is quite a nice way to do this. One thing that's particularly attractive here is we can even target where the pH drop zone is using light to add an additional stimuli to give us a wider variety of control over this system. Our second strategy is more ambitious. We now want to take the molecular machines that already exist and put them into membranes. They can't do any work in solution. In a membrane, they can. A molecular machine in a membrane hasn't been done. And so autonomous transport hasn't been observed, but autonomous behavior has. And this hasn't been possible previously simply because the technology didn't exist. A molecular machine that actually worked in solution hasn't actually existed in the way that you could put it across a membrane until about 6 years ago. And so, of course, anchoring in a membrane is very important. And actually, I'd like to flip the way this meeting works. Rather than thinking about what molecular machines can do for contemporary materials, here we're thinking about what contemporary materials can do for molecular machines. And so how can we do this? One member of our team is an expert in molecular dynamics, and we can use these simulations to start to determine how these structures interact with membranes. This is one of our risk management strategies that allows us to be able to work out, will this work at a very sort of coarse grain level? And we can look at coarse grain simulations and atomistic simulations to understand how the behavior of these systems work. We can look at how the kinetics of the system works. That allows us to determine directionality of our system. So who cares? So don't read this. just notice there's a lot of information on this slide. These are all of the ion channelopathies that exist, that are maybe not even all of them, perhaps. There's a lot. You can start to begin addressing these by having an addressable toolbox of molecular transporters, triggers, stimuli, fuels, and this doesn't even cover anything related to artificial materials or any other materials application that we could have. So there's really a large scope here in what we can do. How can we measure the transport? Well, fortunately, we have someone in our team as well that's able to use aptamers to bind single molecules inside giant unilamellar vesicles. You can then observe this using a fluorescence technique, and so this allows us to monitor the transport across a membrane. You've got a visual, quantifiable output of what you're actually doing. And this can be used for small molecules and also for ions, and we saw this yesterday. Additionally, we can start to take this into cells. So you can imagine you have a cell here with one of our machines incorporated into it. You pinch it inside this lysosome, and then you can actually voltage clamp this and do fluorescence on it at the same time. The person in our team is the only person in the world that has the capability to do this. And this is one of our unique selling points. We have a considerable advantage over the competition in the way that we can assess how our systems are going to work. Furthermore, I've already talked about a toolbox. So a toolbox isn't much use if you can't use it. So one thing that we're very interested in is starting to use microplate readers, which can allow us to start to assess a library of compounds that we have in rapid time. So here, you can take different combinations of active transporters, fuels, and cargoes, and rapidly screen them by putting them with artificial compartments, such as vesicles, into each of these microplate readers. You can get a simple fluorescence output, and this can give you a qualitative assessment of whether your system might work. You can pick individual targets, you can discard the ones that don't work, and then begin more actively focusing on things that do. And that's a way of streamlining our workload. In terms of a timeline, we've gone for a 5-year timescale here. So the small molecule active transporters are more based in grounded literature. We feel that's more achievable in the beginning. That's where we'll start our initial investigations, and then we'll move on to doing active transport and vesicles and then microplate reader testing. The development of molecular machines as synthetic constructs is more challenging. This will begin slightly later on, and we'll actually incorporate a larger portion of time than is over here, and then these will also be incorporated into vesicles. We'll also begin identifying oscillating fuel sources at the beginning of the project, and then we can start coupling these to the small active transporters and the machines that we've already identified in these two timelines, starting with small molecule transporters. And one of our goals at the end is to then have an autonomously fueled single molecule machine that operates in the membrane. That's our target by the end of year 5. So as funding, we've identified the NSF and the variety of portions within it, and the Department of Energy as our fuel sources, as our funding sources. NIH and the Department of Defense will be employed later on. We anticipate employing 2 postdocs supported by 3 graduate students at costs of around about $290,000 a year. We've actually accommodated for overheads and consumables. We have travel involved here. It's very important that we disseminate everything that we're doing. Obviously, we've got a very, very diverse team. We're not all based in the same place. Our travel is also to allow the researchers to travel between sites. That gives us excellent intellectual expertise. We can improve the people that are working with us. We can create better scientists and improve technology at the same time. We want to spend about $500,000 on equipment that will allow us to be a world leader in this area by the end of the 5-year plan. And at the end of 3 years, we'll begin searching for new investment from other grant funding bodies. Here's our team. There are no names. We're very sorry about that. It was a bit tight on time, but we have a wide range of skills here that can come to bear to tackle this problem. So our milestones really are incorporating molecular machines into membranes. We want to generate out of equilibrium states using small molecule transporters and then couple these to autonomous fuel sources. We can develop screening technologies to allow us to quickly determine whether we can have biological targets tackled by our active transporters. We need to identify fuel sources that can oscillate and operate autonomously, and then successfully couple transport to autonomous fuel sources is our ultimate aim. The impact here is that this is going to be a transformative toolbox to target channelopathies, which may also have applications later on in materials science. It allows us to understand basic principles that are fundamental to biology and is of great interest to science in general. And we can have start to exert synthetic spatial and temporal control over where we put cargoes, and then we can begin to think about applying these to functional materials. So, thank you very much.
Do we have some questions from our judges?
I know I'm sold, but I have a suggestion. There might be room for some young faculty award type of proposals built in this that you can leverage with the overall overarching scheme. 5 years in your mind, it's okay, but for the funding agencies may be scary, so I will strategize it so that you can sell it. Perhaps have some prior initial results so that you can try to negotiate for.
So I had actually, my question is a good follow-on to that comment. So you've broken up your proposal into 2 segments, a phase 1 and a phase 2. What would you envision as your end target at phase 1? What would you define as success to be able to prove the feasibility and move on to a stage 2? And this is agnostic of what the funding source is.
So I think at the end of phase 1, actually having small molecule transporters that we can couple to oscillators would be a very nice ending point to the phase 1 part of the project. So I'm not suggesting that we divide the work up into 2 discrete parts, because I don't think that's a very efficient way to manage your team. Certainly, we would like to have completed the synthesis of some prototypical machines that we could incorporate into membranes and have done some molecular dynamics studies on those. And we'd also want to have then, as I've already said, had the small molecule active transporters already working in vesicles and may have begun exploring the autonomous element of it, because then we can begin applying what we've learned in phase 1 to then the more exciting sort of out there thing of using mechanical interlock molecules in phase 2.
Thank you. And the reason I asked that question again, just agnostic of the funding sources, more in the sense of, you know, where do you feel confident that this is a viable approach and you should move forward with it, or this isn't working, let's, you know, stop now and course correct and go in a different route. So thank you. That was kind of the type of answer I was looking for.
Just quick question, James. This is good. Just wonder, when you put the molecules on the membrane, do you, 2 things I would say. Would you assume operation at equilibrium when the system is stable, or will be non-equilibrium, or we don't know?
Can you repeat the first one again?
When you put the molecule, whatever molecule it is, at the membrane level and start moving, the operation, especially the energy and will be assuming system at equilibrium or no, which is fine. And if what is the effect of thermal noise or temperature on that?
Right. So the transport, when you insert something into the membrane, you'll be in under equilibrium conditions. The conditions on each side of the membrane will be the same, and we want to observe the transporter pushing the system out of equilibrium. Temperature is a different question. So that very much depends on what the membrane is built out of, and we have a lot of control over that. You can change what the membrane leaflets are. You could explore different temperatures if you chose to. You can explore membrane fluidity. You can look at if it's more gel-like or more liquid-like, and you've got a lot of capacity and scope there to do other studies as well.
Exactly, and that's coming to the next point. Something like this will be at the end of phase 1. I'm just going from a program point of view, having like a library of membranes, a library of molecules, and definitely everyone will go to a different application. And just this is addition, like an input, not something critical.
Thank you.
Any other questions from our judges? No? Let's give them a hand here. Okay, now while the judges